Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto was successor of Sarutobi? Part 5. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created many playlists, check it out in the channel. So let's start the video. Naruto huffed as he leaned back against the academy building and crossed his arms, his blue eyes latched onto Sasuke's onyx ones. He didn't want to be there at that moment. What do you want, Sasuke? I'm not in the mood for any of your insults today. The Uchiha stood up a bit straighter and steeled himself. He hated situations like these. Turning his head to the side slightly so Naruto couldn't see the expression on his face, he spoke with determination. That woman, the one who picked you up yesterday, she is your sensei, yes? Naruto squinted his eyes and shifted his back against a stone wall. What was the Uchiha digging at? Yeah, so? Sasuke closed his eyes and swallowed, looking like he had drunk sour milk. He hated asking for help, it always left a bad taste in his mouth ever since his brother refused to help him. He grit his teeth and opened his eyes slowly. I want her to teach me. You went up against a Chunin and were able to land decisive blows on him. I need that power, Uzumaki. I need to get stronger quickly. She has to teach me. Ask her to teach me. Naruto blinked slowly and uncrossed his arms. So that's what this was all about. He looked up at the sky and sighed. This probably wouldn't go over well. Not my call. You want her to teach you, you go ask her. Anko-sensei doesn't do anything she doesn't want to do, never has, never will. But if you want to be her new pincushion, then by all means, be my guest. If you're there, perhaps she won't cut me up so bad. The more Naruto mused on the situation in an amused manner, the more Sasuke's blood boiled. He hated being ignored. He hated being made fun of. Especially by someone he held as being beneath him. With a lunge forward, he grabbed Naruto by the collar and thrust him against a building, ending the boy's thoughts immediately. Don't patronize me. I need power now. I have to avenge my family. Their blood cries out from the soil. Naruto glared at the boy and shoved his arms away, turning his body so he presented less of a target in case the Uchiha decided to attack. I'm not playing around, Uzumaki. These little academy games? They aren't helping me at all. I need power to accomplish my goal. I'm going to kill him and revive my clan. Your sensei is strong. I can use her power to grow stronger. Naruto frowned and tensed, his fist balling up. See? That's the whole problem. You said the word use. You can't use people like Sasuke. Not for that purpose. It's wrong. You're going about this the wrong way. Sasuke ground his teeth and pointed his finger in Naruto's face, not 2 inches from his nose, the heat of the moment fueling his anger. And that would you know? You don't know what it's like to be alone, to have no one. You still have parents. You still have a family. You have people who care about you. Naruto growled, a bestial growl that shook Sasuke, even in his anger, and jabbed his own finger in the Uchiha's face, his fangs on full display. And you would, if you'd take that stick out of your ass. You have a village full of people who love you because you're the last Uchiha. You don't know what it's like to be hated for something you have no control over. You don't know what it's like to be called a demon. Sasuke lowered his finger and glowered at Naruto, who lowered his finger, and the two stood chest to chest, snarling. So you won't ask your sensei to teach me? Ask her yourself. You want her to teach you so bad, go find her and ask her. I'm not your slave, Sasuke, and I'm not going to bow down to you like the rest of them. Sasuke turned his back, having been denied what he wanted for the first time in a long time. It was hard and yet refreshing at the same time. He might not have the help of the demon sensei, but he'd find someone stronger. There was always someone stronger. Before he walked back around the corner, he turned and sneered at Naruto. I didn't actually think you'd help me. After all, why would a demon help the one who is set to destroy him? I'll avenge my family, and then I'll complete my father's wish. Without another word, Sasuke walked around the corner and back to his favorite spot in the schoolyard, his fangirls falling in behind him. Naruto emerged moments later and plodded back over to his friends, flopping down beside Hinata. He reached around behind him and plucked something minuscule off his back, turning it in his hands as all his friends watched. Narrowing his eyes, he held out the small bug to Shino. Next time you place one of your little friends on me, Shino, I'll squish it. And don't you tell anyone what was said, understood? Shino nodded and let the bug crawl into his sleeves. I apologize for my actions, Naruto. I simply thought it best to send one of my bugs in case Sasuke tried to be abrupt. I had the situation under control. Naruto turned to Hinata and frowned at the look on her face. She looked disappointed in him. You were watching with your Byakugan, weren't you? And reading lips, I suppose? Yes, I was. Some of those things you said to Sasuke-san were harsh and unlike you. Of course, that was no excuse for his actions either. Naruto sighed and put his hand to Hinata's ear, making her blush from the close contact. Hinata-chan, please, don't tell anyone anything you heard. I'll explain what all was said one day, since I trust you more than anyone. Just don't ask me right now, okay? Hinata nodded and fought her blush down as the boys all looked on with smirks. Kiba couldn't help himself. So moving in on Hinata already, huh, Naruto? The blonde blushed and glared at his doggy friend. If you know what's good for you, you'll drop this right now. Kiba grinned and latched his arms around the necks of Shikamaru and Choji. Come on guys, it's time for a song. You know which one. I'm not singing that. Yeah, Naruto will kill us. Kiba frowned and decided to sweeten the deal, whispering to them. Help me make fun of him, and I'll buy you a puzzle book and a big bag of chips. TCH troublesome I'm in. Any flavor I want? Any flavor you want. Choji grinned and waited for Kiba to start. Naruto might hurt them in the end, but it was a free bag of chips. Kiba cinched his arm around their necks tighter and belted out the lyrics. Naruto and Hinata sitting in a tree. Shikamaru and Choji grinned and joined in. Kissing? You're all dead. Hinata and Shino watched in barely contained amusement as a vengeful Naruto chased the three laughing boys all around the schoolyard, barely missing them until Shikamaru caught him in his Kajimane jutsu and tried not to release it as the blonde was tickled mercilessly by Kiba and Choji. Shino scooted closer to Hinata, still staring at the ongoing shenanigans. You heard what was said, as well? She nodded, giggling at Naruto's predicament. Yes, I read their lips. I can't believe that the Uchihas held such beliefs about Naruto-kun. Nor can I. He has given no indication that he has done anything demonic. The growl is somewhat disturbing, but I chalk that up to intimidation and using chakra to massage his throat muscles as he expels air. Quite a useful intimidation tactic. I believe we should keep an eye on Naruto's back from now on. Sasuke is not one to let a slight go lightly. Hinata nodded grimly and tried not to laugh as Shikamaru marched Naruto up in front of her, still caught in the Kajimane, and made him kneel down in front of her. Hinata was immediately wary, but with Naruto blocking her way, she couldn't move. Naruto was struggling to get out, but Shikamaru was holding him firm. He could practically feel the grin from the three boys on the back of his head. Kiba came around so he could see him and smirked. Now, Naruto, you know what the song said. We can't have you being a bad boyfriend to Hinata. The blonde growled and bore his teeth. Kiba, you better tell Shikamaru to let me go. Choji smacked on his chips and smiled, happy for once that Naruto was the one in a bind. Nah, I think you should give Hinata a big old kiss, Naruto. The brunette girl and the blonde boy's eyes flew open and Naruto struggled harder. Damn it, Shikamaru, let me go. The lazy shadow user grinned and leaned in a little bit further. I don't think so. With a quick jolt forward, Naruto's lips impacted with Hinata's and the girl turned blood red before passing out with a small smile on her lips. Naruto was keeping his thoughts somewhere between marveling at how soft Hinata's lips were and the wholesale slaughter of his friends. He shook with fury and Shikamaru couldn't keep the jutsu up and contain his laughter at the same time. Naruto rounded on his three friends with a crazed look in his eye, his fangs glinting in the sunlight. You should run now. The three took off like bats out of hell, Naruto in hot pursuit. The blonde waited until they were gone and walked back over, sitting down beside Hinata. He sighed and shook the girl's shoulder. Hinata-chan, wake up. The small smile on her face grew as she mumbled. Tasty like dango. Naruto frowned and sat her upright, letting her lean against his shoulder. He turned to Shino, whose lips could easily be seen quirked up into a smile, even under his high collar. Not a word, Aburam. Wouldn't think of it, as a lover boy. Naruto growled and went back to trying to wake up Hinata before lunch was over. Jackass. Kurenai and Anko watched the shenanigans from the window, laughing heartily at the antics of the students. Once they saw that it was mostly over, Anko turned to Kurenai with a serious look on her face. "So you were there, as well?" Kurenai blinked in surprise. She was sure that her genjutsu had been foolproof. "Yes, I was. I heard everything." "So are you going to teach him?" Anko frowned and looked back out the window. "Hell no. He's a selfish, whiny, manipulative little brat, and I'm not sharing my knowledge so he can go and get himself killed by his brother. I'll stick to my current student, who you've spent most of the time carving up. You know, I just had a thought." Anko smirked and turned around to face her friend. "Oh really?" Kurenai smiled and leaned against Aruka's desk. "Revenge was sweet sometimes. I remember you saying that you thought Naruto was cute and worth your time. I didn't know you were into younger guys." Anko huffed angrily and held her hand up, ticking off fingers. 1. He's like, what, 10 years old? That's just wrong. 2. I'm not a pedophile. I'll leave that to him. 3. Well, who knows what he'll be like when he's older. I'll reserve judgment until then." Kurenai gaped at her snaky friend and plastered her hand over her face. "Oh gods, you are staking a claim on him. Anko, you should be ashamed." Anko rolled her eyes and groaned. "I'm not staking a claim. I'm just saying he won't be 10 forever. Who knows what could happen later. Sicko. You love me anyway." Kurenai sighed and looked at the clock. "Look, I have to let the kids back in, so you need to disappear. Try not to bust any more windows when you pick Naruto up this evening." Anko pouted and slid the window open. Spoil sport. Months passed, and there were no more incidents from Sasuke on Naruto's part. Anko, however, had been stopped by the boy on the way out of her favorite dango shop. She'd known he was tailing her, but had ignored it since she had no intention of teaching him anything. When he had stood in her way, she had put her hands on her hips and glared at him. "What do you want, brat?" Sasuke had given her a cold look and bowed before her. Anko was sure the boy's back was about to break from the strain. Uchihas didn't bow to those below their station. "I humbly ask that you take me on as a student so that I can learn to fight." "Denied." Sasuke growled and looked up into Anko's unamused eyes. "Why?" "Because you want power for the wrong reasons. I'm not helping a delusional brat get himself killed." People had begun to stop on the streets now and listen to the proceedings. Anko wasn't a popular figure in Konoha, but no one doubted her skill. What amazed them was that she was refusing to teach the last Uchiha. Most would give their right arms for the honor. Anko spun on her heel and began to walk off when Sasuke yelled out. "You think you know everything, huh? You don't know anything about my situation." Anko rounded on him immediately, calling on her Sine Jashu Jutsu and pinning the boy to the wall with snakes on either side of his head. "Don't talk down to me, brat. I know more about betrayal than you'll know in a lifetime. Don't preach to me, and don't presume that I'm one of your worshippers. You'll never be a student of mine, ever." Sasuke watched her go and seethed. Why was it that he seemed to be on the short end of the stick lately? Naruto had chuckled when she told him the story. He pitied the kid's situation, but he was going about it the wrong way. He couldn't stand that. His skill with his knife had grown by leaps and bounds to the point where he could sometimes catch Anko off guard. His training with Asuma had been a boon. Guy had run him into the ground, forcing him to new levels, and his speed and strength had improved greatly. Sarutobi had been busier than ever though and hadn't had time to teach him much of anything else, so Naruto had taken to reading and trying things on his own. He'd learned a few, but nothing powerful. His Kekkei Genkai had improved the most. His speed underground was almost as fast as his speed above ground, and after several experiments at the Hokage office, he had found that his chakra signature was completely hidden from the Sharingan and the Byakugan. It seemed he actually became the object he was in. He was completely hidden. Guy had found it to be almost like a game, trying to figure out where Naruto would pop up next in their spars. Asuma found it to be very troublesome, since his training involved sharp pointy things. Anko loved it, absolutely loved it. She'd swore that in his final academy year, she'd begin to teach him the skills of the assassin. Naruto couldn't wait. He'd begun to notice that Hinata acted strange around him ever since that kiss, and whenever he'd ask her what was wrong, she'd blush and say nothing. As long as he kept at it though, eventually she'd stop blushing and be able to hold a conversation. By the next day though, she'd be back to looking like a cherry. He blamed his friends for her predicament and vowed to get them back. Naruto was now sitting at the top of the class, the top slot alternating between him and Sasuke. Naruto really didn't care one way or the other if he was number 1 and decided he didn't want to encourage Sasuke to turn it into a competition. So, he did the only thing he could think of and slipped to number 2 in classwork. He didn't let the physical stuff slide though. That was his domain. He'd noticed a trend in the girls of his class as Kurenai began to mold them. Some were beginning to actually take their studies seriously, some had dropped out completely. Others were coming along more slowly, and the truly fanatical fangirls among them had made no progress whatsoever. Kurenai knew she couldn't really hold them back, but she had hoped her threat would carry a little more weight. Her lessons on being true kunoichi had broken through to one girl in particular, however. This is why we find Yamanaka Ino approaching one Uzumaki Naruto as he prepared to walk outside for lunch one day. Yamanaka Ino had been popular her whole life. She had helped her friend Sakura with her confidence issues early on in life and had gained a friend. But she'd also lost one in gaining Sakura, since none of the girls would play with her if she was friends with Naruto. She'd asked the boy one day what he had done to make them angry, but he seemed to genuinely not know what the problem was. She'd told him if he was going to run off with her new friends then she didn't want anything to do with him, and she'd stuck to that. Naruto had not pressed her either. But even Ino had to admit that the boy had been fun to hang around and play with. Shikamaru, Chaoji, and the rest had stuck by him and had suffered no ill effects. As the years went on, she began to think perhaps she had been too hasty in tossing him aside. She'd gone on over the years to obsess over Sasuke, as he was the coolest boy in school, and being the most popular girl herself, she thought it was a perfect match. No matter how much she or any other girl tried though, they couldn't break through his cold exterior. No matter what they did, no matter how pretty they were, or how hard they trained, Sasuke would not be moved. He was a sympathetic figure, and every girl fantasized about mending his broken heart. Once Naruto joined the class, Ino had been more preoccupied than ever with her thoughts. She'd even been arguing with Sakura less and less over Sasuke. Naruto hadn't once looked her way, and for some reason that bothered her. She knew she was a good-looking girl, and when she got older and started developing more she'd be a knockout. But the only girl Naruto interacted with was Hinata. She monopolized him, even if the other girls weren't interested. You don't monopolize a boy. She'd watched how Sasuke interacted with him, and every time had become less and less impressed with the Uchiha's attitude. Not that she was giving up on Sasuke anytime soon. But she was starting to see her fellow blonde in a new light. Then Kurenai-sensei had come along and turned her world upside down as to how a true kunoichi acted. Kurenai was beautiful, the envy of women, and the object of desire for men, but she was all business. That was a true kunoichi, and Ino wanted that. Hell, even Naruto's weird sensei Anko was a hot type, and everyone knew she killed for fun. After weighing her options and digging through her heart and soul, Ino had come to one inevitable conclusion. She had wronged Naruto when they were little, and she needed to ask for forgiveness. She could only hope he'd accept. Naruto watched with interest as Ino approached him and remained seated. Hinata opted to stay as well just in case. She couldn't explain it, but since that kiss, she'd felt strange around Naruto. If only she could put her finger on it. Ino gulped as she walked up under the scrutinizing blue eyes of Uzumaki Naruto. She'd forgotten how you could get lost in them, like they went on forever. Shaking that thought from her head, she smiled shyly and waved. Ino-san. How can I help you? Ino's hand dropped to her side. That was a much cooler reception than she'd figured on, but then again, maybe she deserved it. She slipped her small smile back on and put her hands behind her back. Can I talk to you? Naruto sighed and turned to his brunette friend, taking notice of the unhappy look on her face. She didn't like it when he talked to other girls. Hinata-chan, go ahead and start eating. I won't be long. Hinata nodded and grabbed both of their lunches before starting down the steps, glaring at Ino as she went by. The platinum blonde girl cocked an eyebrow and watched Hinata walk out the door, turning around at the doorway to look at Naruto again. Surely the two weren't dating? Ino-san? Ino turned around again to find Naruto standing with his hands in his pockets, looking at her with disinterest. This was not going how she had planned. Naruto, what happened? Naruto gave her a funny look and took his hands out of his pockets. What do you mean? Ino tilted her head toward the floor and shuffled her feet. This wasn't going how she had planned at all. When we were little, and I said that I wouldn't play with you if you ran off with my new friends, why didn't you try to play with me? Ino, you're the one who pushed me away, not the other way around. You were the one who believed I was a bad person. Ino's eyes widened, and she interjected quickly. I never thought you were a bad person. I just. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and Ino cringed under their gaze. Those pools of blue were petrifying when they were trained on you in a malicious way. You just what? Didn't care that you hurt my feelings back then, and in no way, shape, or form in the past few years have made any strides to mend anything. Why now, Ino? Why talk to me now? Want to find out what Sasuke said to me? Or were you sent by him to beg on his behalf? Ino's eyes kept whitening the more he went on, and tears began to well up in her eyes. That's not it at all. I just wanted to apologize to you. Naruto ran a hand through his hair and sighed, looking at Hinata out the window. He wanted to be down there with his friends, not up here with Ino. Taking a deep breath, he exhaled slowly and locked eyes with the girl in front of him. If you want to apologize, prove to me that you are serious. Actually be friendly to me, and eventually I might consider you a friend. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm late to lunch with my friend. As he pushed past her, Ino grabbed his arm. Naruto slowly let his gaze rise from her hand to her face and gave her a questioning look. Are you and Hinata dating? Naruto frowned and shook her hand loose. Not that it matters, but no, we're not. Maybe one day though. Good day, Ino-san. Without another word he was out the door and headed down the hall. Ino watched as he waved happily to Hinata, and she smiled as she handed him his lunch. Ino sighed wistfully and put her hand to the glass. From her vantage point, she could see two opposite ends of the spectrum. Naruto and his warmth, laughing and joking with his friends. Sasuke and his cold demeanor, brooding and glaring at anyone and everyone that came near. Truly, the two were night and day. Ino just needed to find out whether she preferred sunrise or sunset. Hinata beamed at Naruto as he flopped down beside her and handed him his lunch. So, how'd Naruto-kun go? Naruto fished the apple packed for him out of the bag and took a bite, leaving imprints where his fangs cut through. He chewed slowly and smiled at Hinata, swallowing before he spoke. Ino wanted to apologize for not being my friend all these years. He took another bite and stared ahead. Hinata looked at him expectantly and after several moments of nothing, began to get a little peeved. And? Naruto stared at her blankly for several moments before realization dawned on him and his mouth formed an O. Oh, I told her to act friendly if she wanted to be my friend. That was that, I think. Oh. She also wanted to know if we were going out. I told her no. Hinata's head sank a little, but she retained her smile. Oh, okay. Naruto grinned at her reaction. Messing with Hinata was fun. He'd never known her to be the jealous type. Maybe in a couple years he'd be willing to date her. Wasn't like he'd find another girl interested in him anyway. Hinata-chan, why do you sound so down? You're not jealous, are you? Hinata blushed and hunched down inside her jacket. The boy could be so embarrassing sometimes. I'm not jealous, I was just worried that she was being mean to you. Naruto nodded and dug into his sack again, pulling out a sandwich. Sure you were, Hinata-chan. Hey, Naruto. What you talking about? Naruto glared at his other friends, seated several feet away. He'd banished them from underneath his and Hinata's tree until he was willing to forgive them for the kiss, no matter how good it felt. He blushed slightly at the memory. You be quiet, Kiba. If it's important, I'll let you know. Ass. Flea-ridden mongrel. You take that back. I am not flea-ridden. Naruto grinned, and it was visible, even from where Kiba sat. But you are a mongrel. He heard Hinata giggle and leaned back against the tree with his arms behind his head. Life was good. More months passed, and it was now the next to last day of the school year. Naruto had been looking forward to and dreading this day, for good reason. It was the day he had to say goodbye to a mentor. Guy stood before his pupil with a solemn look on his face. He'd taught the boy for years, and now that he was taking a genin team of his own, he wouldn't have time for Naruto. As sad as it was, their time together was over. Naruto-kun, I have to say that our years together as sensei and pupil have been memorable. I got to have a hand in a future Hokage's training, got to see an ancient Kekkei Genkai reborn, and have learned much while I taught you. It has been the most youthful run. Naruto smiled and nodded. He didn't trust his voice at the moment. He'd come far under Guy's tutelage, and even though the man was weird, he would miss him. Guy noticed a wetness growing in the boy's eyes and decided to stem it before it got too bad. Come now, Naruto-kun, no tears. I'm not going away forever. This just marks the end of one facet of our relationship and the beginning of another. I look forward to the day we can have a match as fellow Konoha shinobi. By the time that happens, you will have learned more, become more experienced, become stronger, and we can have a truly youthful match. Naruto nodded and wiped at his eyes. Guy knelt down to his level and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. My last request, as your sensei, Naruto, is that you grant me one final spar, for old time's sake. My Goken versus your Calaripe-adu. Let this be a precursor to our match in the future. Naruto smiled and settled into his favorite position, while Guy leapt away and landed in his Goken stance. The two stared at each other for a while before Guy rushed forward, kicking at Naruto's head. Naruto ducked under the kick and pressed upward with his palm, gently knocking Guy's leg away. They weren't going all out, more like dancing with each other in a dance that had no set moves. They twirled and tumbled around each other, the dance becoming faster and faster, furiouser and furiouser until it could be called an all-out battle. The two ran back and forth across the field, throwing punches and kicks left and right. All blows were blocked, and it would have been considered a true fight if not for one simple fact. Both of them had huge grins on their faces. Anko watched from the trees as the two maneuvered back and forth across the clearing. It was calming to watch them, the way they moved was perfect. Goken with its stiff, straightforward kicks and punches, Calaripe-adu with its gradual increase of the power behind the blows, and the fluid way that any and all attacks were avoided. She felt a weight land beside her and bowed her head when she recognized the white robes. Hokage-sama. Sarutobi smiled at Anko and turned his head back to watch the fight. They're quite a pair, aren't they? I wish Guy had waited to take a team, but he insisted on helping a certain boy that caught his eye. I had wanted for him to have Naruto on his team. Anko watched the two swing away and thought out her words carefully. Hokage-sama, I would still like to take the boy under my wing. He's the only one I've ever found worth teaching. Sarutobi watched the two in silence for a bit longer, listening to the wind whistle through the leaves of the tree. I'll consider it, Anko. It's been my wish for him to follow tradition and be on a team. I'd still like for that to happen. Sometimes traditions don't work in Hokage-sama. Sometimes, tradition must be broken so that new traditions can take hold. Sarutobi turned to the woman and chuckled, getting a raised eyebrow. He coughed into his hand and straightened himself out. It's nothing, Anko. I just find it hard to believe that something so philosophical came out of your mouth. Anko growled and turned to where Guy and Naruto were bowing to one another in reverence, their final act as student and teacher. She smiled slightly and sighed. Don't expect it to happen too often. That boy just brings out the best in me, I guess, or the worst, if you listen to him. A chuckle came from beside her and she smiled softly, something that rarely happened. Please consider my offer. I think it would be beneficial for all parties. Sarutobi nodded and leapt out of the tree, Anko following him as he began his trek back to the tower. He put his hands behind his back and turned to her. Anko, I want you to begin teaching him the ways of the assassin. Her grin was so bright it could have lit up a city block. Naruto followed Sarutobi closely as he was led to a place he'd never been before. Oh, he'd been in the general vicinity. Anko had taken him to the Forest of Death many times just to cut him up in private. Training Ground 44 was her own little sanctuary. Listening to her talk about the cute, fuzzy animals or the beautiful foliage made it sound like a zoo or the botanical gardens. Of course, that was not the case at all. Anko's cute, fuzzy animals were cousins of Bengal tigers that were the size of freaking elephants. Her beautiful foliage could actually eat a man. Eat a man. Needless to say, Naruto thought his eccentric sensei was more than a little off in the head. He missed Guy already. Sarutobi unlocked a gate that Naruto had never been shown before, and the two went down a set of stairs into a stone walkway. Naruto noticed that there were lights only every so few feet, giving off a very creepy ambience. He kept close to his grandfather, hoping that wherever he was being taken, they would arrive soon. Eventually, after walking for what seemed like forever, they reached a heavy steel door, which Sarutobi opened by channeling chakra into a seal. As the door began to swing open, light filtered in around the edges until it opened fully, the glare from the sun letting them know they were back outside. Naruto rubbed his eyes, getting used to the brightness after being inside the tunnel. He looked around with bleary eyes to find Anko sitting on a large rock in the middle of a grassy field, eating dango and drinking red bean soup. As his vision became more and more normal, he took a better glance at his surroundings. Not far in the background were the enormous trees of the forest of death. The field they were standing in was particularly peaceful, and that alone bothered him. With Anko around, nothing was ever peaceful. He saw her hop off the rock and walk toward his grandfather, who had an eerie smile on his face to match hers. Anko placed one foot in front of the other, swinging her hips as she walked, like she was on a model's runway. The leer she gave Naruto made him cringe inside, dreading what he knew was going to be an awful time. Sarutobi was starting to get a little hot under the collar and was starting to wonder if he'd made the right decision in entrusting Naruto to such a woman. Anko bowed to the Hokage and righted herself again to look at her pupil. Her smirk could have made a statue of marble wince. It was the same smirk that always promised pain for Naruto. "Have you informed him of why he's here yet, Hokage-sama?" Sarutobi shook his head and motioned for Naruto to step forward. The blonde did so reluctantly, having no idea what he was in for. He took a deep breath and looked his sensei dead in the eye. Anko took note of this and smiled. "Points for courage, brat. Now, Hokage-sama, please inform him why we're all here." Sarutobi coughed into his hand, getting Naruto's attention, and put his hands behind his back. "Naruto, it is my decision that you will now begin to learn about the ways of the assassin from Anko. She will teach you everything she knows. Everything. You will learn how to kill properly, and you will learn how to interrogate people. Your Kekkei Genkai makes you our most able assassin ever, and you will have to embrace this role. I know you don't like to kill, and that is good. Never enjoy it, but realize that it is an important part of your job. Your sessions with Anko will take precedence over all your other arrangements. This is your new assignment." Naruto nodded and turned his attention back to Anko, who was uncharacteristically serious. "All right, Naruto. As Hokage-sama said, after school, you're mine. I'm going to show you everything there is to know about being an assassin. How to kill properly, how to leave no trace of your presence, how to get information out of a prisoner, how to be a proper assassin. I'm going to run you into the ground, and once I can't pound you into the ground anymore, you'll dig your own hole just to try to get away." Naruto's eyes widened the more she explained, and he turned to his grandfather to find him deadly serious. He was actually going to be an assassin. He didn't know what to think. His thoughts were broken by Anko snapping her fingers in front of his face. "Wake up, brat. Can't have you drifting off like that during training. Not all of our training will be physical. Oh, that'll be a big part of it, but we'll be doing mental training as well. My colleagues and I will be showing you how to keep your emotions in check on a mission. You don't have to be a cold killer, but you need to learn when to rein in your emotions." She began to pace back and forth, never breaking eye contact with her student. "I'm going to teach you how to eliminate your target with minimal evidence you were there. With your ability, you should be the most effective assassin ever. We're going to have to up your training with your Kekkei Genkai as well. You'll need to be able to melt in and out of your environment on a whim. That overgrown butter knife you carry? That's gonna get a workout as well." Naruto's eyes were cutting back and forth as she paced, nervous as to how this would turn out. Anko stopped in front of him again and leaned down to eye level. "You will do everything I say to perfection. I will expect nothing less from you. By the time this year is up, you'll be the best genin to ever come out of Konoha. We'll worry about the best ninja when you can actually beat some of your senses." She smirked as she stood upright and put a hand on his head, ruffling his hair. "Don't worry, kid, we're gonna have a lot of fun. And if you're a good boy, maybe I'll give you a treat." She disappeared suddenly and draped herself over his shoulders, tapping a kunai to her heartbeat on his cheek. Naruto grit his teeth and steel himself. He wouldn't let her get to him. Anko took the kunai away and rubbed her cheek against his. "Just think of Naru-chan. For the next year, you're ILLLL mine." The blonde stifled a whimper and looked to his grandfather for help, only to find that the man had a slight nosebleed from the sight before him. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Time for some revenge. He shrugged his shoulders hard, ridding himself of Anko, and put his hands in the ram seal. "Hey Gigi. Check this out. Warwick no jutsu." Sarutobi's clouded mind barely registered the word sexy jutsu, and he turned to the billowing cloud of smoke as Anko hopped back. His eyes widened to impossible degrees as he rocketed backward from his nosebleed. There was a full-grown blonde woman with her grandson's whiskered cheeks, boobs of impossible proportions, naughty bits covered by the tiniest bit of smoke. Naruto struck a provocative pose and turned to Anko, blowing her a kiss. I told him I'd get him. He had that coming. What are you looking at? Anko was looking at him with a devilish glaze to her eye. She licked her lips and grinned savagely. I like you naked, as a female. Very hot. But I wonder, are you just as hot as a guy? Naruto made a choking sound and let the hinge drop. Anko advanced on him quickly with her kunai at the ready. Hold still and let me cut some clothing off. Hell no. Anko missed a swipe and growled as Naruto dove headfirst for a tree and melted inside. She pounded on the bark for a while until Sarutobi laid a hand on her shoulder, his nosebleed and the evidence of it miraculously gone. He's not here anymore, Anko. He's more than likely already home. Let's call it a day. Anko pouted like a 2-year-old but followed him toward the tunnel. Sarutobi glanced back over his shoulder with a stern look. Not one mention of what happened here today. I'll demote you to D ranks for the duration of the year. Anko pouted even more. She'd hoped to at least have a small bit of leverage against the old man with that little bit of knowledge. The following day came and went, and Naruto found himself walking down that dimly lit tunnel to that field to meet Anko. He was excited to train with Anko, but at the same time, he was scared stiff. This was his biggest step toward adulthood yet, and another huge step toward assuming his duty as the next Hokage. He channeled chakra into the seal on the door and closed his eyes as it slid open. Once the light had subsided, he could make out Anko sitting on the rock again. When she saw Naruto, she shunshined in front of him and stared down at him. Once again, any humor in her face was gone. All right, brat, listen up. No more games. No more teasing you. We're in this for real now. From this moment on, it's you and me. Some of the things I'm going to teach you will be hard to stomach, but I know you can handle it. Are you ready? Naruto straightened his backbone and nodded with determination. Anko kept up her stern look and motioned for him to follow her. She leapt onto the rock again and patted the place in front of her. Naruto sat down opposite her and crossed his legs. Anko looked off into the forest, somewhat distant, before turning back to her student. Naruto, the path that has been chosen for you is hard. I know that Hokage-sama has told you this before, but the path of an assassin is especially hard. It's hard on the body, and it's hard on the mind. Any of those who have been in Anbu can tell you this. It's how you decide to cope that determines how your life turns out. Naruto nodded and raised his hand. Anko sighed as she slapped his hand down. This isn't school. Just ask your question. How do you cope with ninja life? Anko put her finger to her chin and grinned maliciously. I embrace the blood. Instead of letting it get to me, I revel in it. Is that healthy? Anko shrugged and let the grin slide off her face. It's better than curling into a ball and mumbling to yourself in a padded room. My way isn't everyone's way, Naruto. Guy copes by training himself to exhaustion. Kakashi, who I assume you've met, reads those little smutty books of his. My colleague, Ibiki, who you'll meet later, copes by letting his sadistic streak out on prisoners. We all cope in our own way. Naruto sat in silence for a moment before looking Anko in her eyes. How should I cope? In whatever way leaves you with a smile on your face at the end of the day. Our way of life isn't easy, Naruto. You've already taken a life. That's good. But that was in defense of your mother. You've yet to take a life in the name of your village because it was your job to do so. I'm going to change that though. Naruto's eyes widened. Surely she didn't mean. You're not going to take me on a mission, are you? Anko smirked as she stood up, beckoning him to do the same. Yes, I am. I've already cleared it with Hokage-sama as soon as I deem you ready. Now, let's start. We've got a long way to go. We'll start with that toothpick on your leg. Show me how you can handle it again. Naruto drew his field knife and got into a strong stance, the blade forward. Anko repeated the gesture with a kunai and the two lunged forward. Naruto learned a lot in his time with Anko. While during the day, he was your normal attentive student, as normal and attentive as he could be. At night he trained to be the best of the best. Anko drilled everything into his head twice over. He knew the best way to a man's heart was not through the stomach, but in the most painful way possible, at least, according to Anko anyway. Anko, to her credit, having never taught anyone before, was incredibly pleased with her student. They'd been at it nearly 3 months, and she'd come to the conclusion that the boy was a natural. He just needed to be guided in the right direction. She nearly sighed when she thought back to how they'd started. Naruto, being young, had thought that assassination required the use of cool moves and neck snaps. While true in some cases, Anko had broken him of those illusions quickly. So let's say that your target is in a room guarded by 4 Jounin-level shinobi. He's asleep on his bed at the moment, totally dead to the world. Your mission is to eliminate him and then bring his head back as proof of the kill. How would you go about doing this job? Naruto thought for a moment before starting. I guess I'd eliminate the guards first. Stab them through the heart and break their necks, something like that. Then I'd go in, kill the target, and cut his head off. Anko glared at her charge and whacked him over the head several times with a magazine she'd been holding. No, no, no. Damn, Naruto, show a little bit more imagination. You have a Kekkei Genkai that would have made that easy, and you never mentioned it once. I'm sure you intended to use it, but details are everything in assassination. Name some assassination moves. Okay. There's inner decapitation, stab through the heart, cut the neck, stab to the brain, sever the spinal cord, Chidori. Anko held her hand up, signaling for him to halt. Stop. Never mention Chidori again as an assassination move. But why? It's classified as an assassination move. It should be included. She narrowed her eyes and glared at him. Since you know the name of that move, I'll assume you know why it's called Chidori. Naruto nodded in affirmation. That's exactly why it shouldn't be called an assassination move. It's too damn noisy. Your target will hear you coming a mile away. That's nothing but a fancy elemental jutsu that Kakashi likes to flatter himself into thinking is used for assassination. His target has to be nearly completely immobile, his hidden Sharingan eye has to be active, and he needs a short moment to prepare the jutsu. To me, that's not very useful. Naruto nodded slowly, letting the information sink in. Anko chose her next words carefully. Not that it isn't a useful jutsu. It's just insulting to me, as an assassin, to have that move labeled as being in my line of work. By the time Kakashi is through posturing and making the hand signs, I could have already buried a kunai in the target's heart and began to cut his head off. I'm going to teach you how to kill the old-fashioned way, with your Kekkei Genkai thrown in. If you can become an excellent shinobi without the use of jutsus, imagine what you could be when you use them when you have to. Naruto's eyes widened at the thought, and Anko decided to end the lecture there. Glad you understand. I was getting tired of talking. Now let's go. I'm going to show the places where you can bleed a person out by using you as an example. They'd covered a lot in such a small time. It helped that the boy was a sponge, soaking up literally everything she told him. And Anko had been true to her word. She'd shown him everything she could. How to hold the knife properly when you go for the heart. How to cut and leave minimal evidence and blood loss. How to cut the head of a target off cleanly. How to kill without using any chakra at all. Anko had drilled it all into him by using him as an example, or rather, his shadow clones. When the information came back to him upon their departure, he would nod to her and then proceed to mimic her over and over on his clones. It was strange in a way, killing yourself over and over, but it was necessary. Each time, he would get the information feedback and adjust the way the blade went in slightly until it flowed in smoothly. He'd learned quickly that there were certain things you just didn't do. Neck snapping was a quick way to kill someone, yes, but a trained ninja could hear the snap and come investigating. Then you were in trouble all over again. Stealth was silent, plain, and simple. Anko had given him the target situation again a few weeks later, and Naruto had gone into more detail. He would bypass the guards with his Kekkei Genkai and come up underneath the target as they lay asleep. He would melt into the mattress and clap his hand over the man's mouth as he drove his field knife into his brain. The death would be silent and quick, with minimal blood loss. While the guards were still outside, he would cut the man's head off, seal it into a scroll, and melt back into the floor, leaving no trace. Anko had never been more proud. The boy was finally showing promise in the field of killing. Practical application was the next step. But before that, she wanted him to know how to interrogate an enemy in the field if information was required. Anko wanted her pupil to be so well-rounded that he'd put circles to shame. She'd decided that she would need Ibiki's help for this, since their approaches were so different. It had been 3 months since Anko's declaration that he would learn the assassin lifestyle. He'd been living a double life, joking with his friends by day, learning the best way to kill by night. It had been hard, but he was coming along. The two were currently in a dimly lit room watching as Ibiki worked over a ninja from Kumo that had been caught inside Konoha's borders. Anko held her hand on Naruto's shoulder to let him know that she was with him as he watched Ibiki pick the man apart. Ibiki started by tying the man to a chair and forcing his head up as he asked all manner of seemingly inane questions. This was to make the man feel that Ibiki didn't know what he was doing, that he was green at interrogating. But Ibiki was planting seeds of doubt in the man, seeds that he would nurture, and when they were ready, they'd eat the man from the inside out. He made prisoners doubt their own minds, made their brains work against them. Naruto watched with interest as Ibiki tore the man's mind apart, leaving him a stuttering mess that spilled whatever information he knew. As the man was hauled away, Ibiki turned to his audience and smirked. The bear of a man put his arms behind his back and strode toward Anko and her new pupil. "So Brad, enjoy the show?" Naruto looked up at the man, but he didn't grin like he usually would. "I can't say it was something I'm used to in Ibiki-san. You broke that man's mind." Ibiki nodded and turned to Anko. "Is Hokage-sama sure he's ready for this line of work?" Anko shrugged, offering no real answer. Ibiki sighed and turned back to the whiskered blonde before him. It wasn't his job to question orders from the Hokage. His job was to follow them. "Whatever. Now then, Naruto, I'm here to help Anko show you the finer points of interrogation. I know it's not a glamorous part of being a shinobi, but it is a necessary part, and everyone has to do it at some point. I'm not part of the crowd that believes we should shield our young shinobi from this fact, but I'm only one vote among thousands. You are going to be my flagship example of why we should introduce it earlier. When Anko and I are through with you, you'll be able to get information from almost anyone." Naruto nodded, still not happy with the situation. Anko looked down at him and let out a groan. "Look brat, Ibiki just told you it's a necessary evil. You don't have to enjoy it to realize that it has to be done. These assholes aren't gonna just give up the information voluntarily." Naruto thought for a moment and glanced up at the two. "What about the Yamanakas? They can enter a mind, can't they? Wouldn't that be easier?" Ibiki frowned and Anko snorted at that. Naruto wasn't happy that his idea was dismissed so easily. Anko decided to elaborate a bit more. "We've tried that before, brat. It's a good idea until someone with a strong mind comes along and overpowers the Yamanaka while they're inside the other's mind. We lost some good ninjas that way, valuable ninjas. It isn't worth the risk." Naruto frowned and nodded. He hadn't thought of that. Ibiki saw this quickly going downhill and decided to get back on track. "Look Naruto, you've seen my way of doing things. In a little while, Anko is going to show you her way. The trick is to make up your own way of getting information. It's just like any other facet of ninja training. You take what you learn and you make it your own. There is no set way of doing things. We might, as well, get this over while you're here. Anko, tell them to bring in the next one." Anko nodded quickly and bounced out of the room like a kid on a sugar high. Ibiki sighed and grabbed Naruto by the shoulder, maneuvering the boy to a different part of the room. "My way is different from Anko's, as I've told you. I prefer to break the mind, she prefers to break the body. But just because my way doesn't leave physical marks doesn't mean I don't do damage that isn't irreparable. Bones can heal, minds can't. My way is actually more detrimental to enemy ninja. It just doesn't show right away." Naruto nodded and watched as Anko came in humming happily with a man in tow. She shoved the man down in the chair and strapped him in. The man looked around the room and settled on Naruto's small form. He turned to Anko and growled. "You people are sick, making a child watch this. He doesn't look old enough to even be a genin yet." Anko just grinned as she laid out her weapons of choice. After several minutes she threw a kunai and it lodged itself into the man's shoulder. He winced and ground his teeth when Anko appeared before him and twisted the knife, a sickening grin plastered on her face. "That is my pupil over there. He's here to learn how to do this properly so that when the time comes, others won't have to. I appreciate you helping him learn. Now then, let's continue, shall we?" Naruto watched intently as she beat the man, cut the man, bled him. She used her snake summons to bite him, swell him up like a balloon, and then drain him of the poison. By the time the session was over, Naruto was a bit green in the face, but he held firm and watched the entire procession. Ibiki couldn't help but be a little proud of the boy. Not many could stomach watching Anko work. Anko wiped the blood off her kunai and dismissed her summons before looking towards Naruto and found the boy still standing on his feet but wavering slightly. So, he hadn't thrown up? That was a good sign. He still looked sick though. She crossed the room, and Ibiki left to tell the ninjas on duty to dispose of the man. He had spilled his guts, literally, of everything he had known about what his village was doing. Naruto had to admit, the two were good at what they did. He just didn't know if he would be. His head snapped up to meet Anko's gaze when she laid her hands on his shoulders, and for once she looked genuinely proud of him. Anko smiled at him and bent down to his level. "That was hard to watch, huh brat? Not as subtle as Ibiki, but I got the information, and in the end, that's all that matters. I don't like mind games. I've had enough of those in my life. I'd rather take the straightforward way to get what I want. You don't have to take either of our paths. Like Ibiki told you, find your own." Naruto nodded and took a deep breath to hold in his discomfort. Ibiki came back and patted him on the head. "You did well, Naruto. I guess having taken a life already gives you an edge above other kids in this area. We'll have you sit in on a few more sessions, take part in some, and then, when we think you're ready, we'll have you conduct your own. Will you supervise me?" "Of course. We'll watch from the wall, but you'll conduct the interrogation. We'll only jump in if necessary." Naruto was glad for that knowledge. At least he wouldn't be alone for the first time. 4 months passed, and Naruto had come far in all he was taught. His ability with his Kekkei Genkai was superb. He could go in and out of objects at will, move through solids at his full running speed, and was, if Ibiki had his way, a shoo-in to take over for the man when he retired as the head of interrogation. Not that Naruto wanted it. He was already being groomed for other things as well, namely Hokage. His friends at school were worried about him. He would come in looking dead tired and flop down in his chair, but by the time Haruka arrived, he would be attentive again. It was strange, but other than that, life was normal. Hinata and Naruto had gotten over their embarrassing moment with the kiss, and everything was right with the world. Naruto was having a rare day off. Anko was off doing something besides torturing him, Asuma was on a date with someone, and Sarutobi had told him to take it easy. He had decided to look up his friends since it was the weekend and there was no school. Fortunately for him, they had decided to look him up instead, and they had a new addition in tow. Naruto blinked when he saw the fuzzy white thing running alongside Kiba. The group came to a stop, and Kiba beamed as his new friend leapt into his arms. "Naruto, say hello to Akamaru. He's gonna be my partner from now on. Akamaru, this is Naruto." The little pup jumped down and walked up to Naruto cautiously, one paw in front of the other, and sniffed his leg before leaping back and barking at Kiba. "Yeah, I know he smells like a fox. I don't know why, he just does. He's a cool guy though." Naruto gave the dog boy a blank stare and looked down at the now wagging puppy. "Did you just talk with your dog?" "Yeah. So?" Naruto knelt down and patted the puppy's head, making it lean into the touch. "Nothing. I just didn't know you could do that. I know Kuramaru can talk, but Akamaru obviously can't. Just wanted to know how that worked." Kiba shrugged and picked Akamaru up, setting him down on his head. "Don't know. Same way Shino communicates with his bugs, I guess. Just do. Now come on. It's the first weekend you've had off in ages from Hokage-sama, and you can relax with us. We're gonna go eat at Ichiraku's to celebrate getting my Ninken. How about it?" Naruto grinned and stepped up beside Hinata and Shino, chatting with the two all the way to the restaurant while Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba joined in. Nothing could ruin his day. The group, now smaller because Choji, Shikamaru, and Shino were dragged away reluctantly by their parents for other duties, sat enjoying the steamy goodness that was a bowl of Ichiraku's ramen. Kiba and Hinata kept up a small conversation, while Naruto chugged unbelievable amounts of ramen, keeping Tucci and Am quite busy in the kitchen. Naruto was the happiest he'd been in a while. No prisoners to worry about torturing, no getting cut up to satisfy a certain sensei's bloodlust, no practicing till he dropped, just a laid-back day spent with his friends. He was just about to suggest that they go do something else when Anko appeared in a puff of smoke, her eyes quickly settling on Naruto. "Oh good, you're here. You, me, now. Come on, we gotta go." Before he could protest, she grabbed him by the arm and sunshine away. Kiba turned to Hinata and blinked. "Is it just me, or does that kid never have a say in what he does?" Hinata sighed, sad that her friend was gone again. He probably wouldn't be back today, and they wouldn't see him till the next class day. She giggled as Akamaru lapped up what Naruto had left in his bowl and stood to leave when they both heard a coughing noise and turned to find Tucci with his arms crossed. And who's paying for all this? Kiba looked at Hinata and she had the same annoyed look he knew he was wearing. Both pretty much had the same thought. I'm gonna kill him. Naruto finally regained his footing as they stopped inside the Hokage office. He glanced around quickly to find an Anbu, Ibiki, and his grandfather occupying the space. Sarutobi nodded to Anko and made them stand at attention. Now then, time is of the essence. A prisoner has escaped who we believe may be working for the enemy. You four are to chase him down and stop him from leaving Fire Country. Use whatever means necessary, but take him alive if possible. Naruto looked around and found everyone's faces quite stern. Cautiously, he asked a question that kept tugging at the back of his mind. Sensei, why am I here? Anko grinned and clapped him on the back. This is that mission I was talking about, brat. You're going to catch this guy and then you're going to interrogate him. If he can't be taken, you'll eliminate him. Plain and simple. But Anko-sensei, I'm not ready. You're ready. You're more than ready. You've been ready for weeks. Now let's go. We've got a bit of ground to cover. As the three adults turned to leave, Naruto shouted for them to wait. Hold on. I don't know anything about who we're chasing and what is an Anbu doing here. Sarutobi sighed and tapped his pipe. He should never have taught the boy protocoler mission parameters. The Anbu is here to help evaluate your skills, Naruto. As for the person, I believe you'll have a vested interest in him. Naruto cut his eyes to his grandfather. Who is it? Mizuki. A look of understanding slowly spread over Naruto's face. Mizuki was a dangerous person and psychotic as well. If he was working for the enemy, he had to be stopped. Naruto nodded and stepped back beside Anko. Sarutobi reached into his desk and pulled out a plain, blank Anbu mask and a dark cloak. Wear this, Naruto. You're not an official ninja yet, so we can't have you being seen in any capacity. Naruto took the mask and placed it over his face before slinging the cloak over his shoulders and turned to Anko. She took in how he looked and decided she liked it. Well, brat? Are you ready? The mask bobbed up and down, and she could feel his resolve steel itself. Hi, sensei. I'm ready. Naruto followed the three superior ninja closely, his blank mask firmly in place and his new cape billowing behind him. Being the junior in a group of experienced ninjas made him very nervous, especially considering all three were there to help apprehend one man. Naruto had read the file on Mizuki before. The man was a high Chunin, low Jounin level ninja, but had been passed up for the Jonin rank because of mental issues. Anko noticed her pupil's silence and guessed he was brooding about what he was going to have to do. They were behind Mizuki by nearly a half a day, leaving them with little time to plan. But it was now approaching nighttime, and that would be a big boon. It helped that the man was in such a rush that he was leaving noticeable signs of where he was going. A broken twig here, a drop of blood there, a thread of clothing attached to a branch. The man left a sign everywhere, and the skilled Anbu who was with them followed the small trail like it was a freeway. Hey, brat. What you thinking about? Naruto cut his eyes over to her briefly, not that she saw it behind the mask. He took a leap onto another branch and kept up his pace while they spoke. I'm trying to think of how you want me to capture him without killing him. I have a few ways I can think of, but he might lose a limb. Anko smirked and leapt lightly from branch to branch. Learning how to talk and tree hop at the same time was a skill vital to Konoha ninjas. Doesn't matter if he loses a limb, just so long as you get the information. Capturing him is the easy part of Naruto. The hard part will be getting information from him. The blonde nodded and turned his gaze back forward. Before he could retreat into his thoughts again, Anko's devious side struck. So what's the deal with you, the Hyuga, and the Yamanaka? You three got a little three-way going on? Ibiki and the Anbu visibly perked up when they heard this, but kept their eyes on the path. Nothing like some teasing to lighten the tension. Anko grinned since she could practically feel the heat coming off of Naruto. Sensei. We're on a mission here. Try to be a little objective. Aw, come on, Naru-chan. Who's the better kisser? Who's got the better body? The world wants to know. I'm 12, you psycho. But you're almost 13. You'll be 13 not long before you graduate. Don't tell me you haven't already cut a pony from the herd. Ibiki and the Anbu landed in a small clearing not far ahead of them, and Anko's smirk grew bigger when her charge wouldn't answer her. Naruto? Still no answer. So you're not gonna tell me which girl you like better? Silence. Anko used her superior speed to get behind him and draped herself over his shoulders, one of her favorite positions to tease him from, as she rubbed her cheek against his. Or are you saving yourself for little old me? Do you have a fetish for older women? I'd love to be the one to pop your cherry. Ibiki and the Anbu chuckled when they heard the boy gurgle and decided to stop Anko before she began undressing the poor lad. Anko, Naruto, come over here. Mizuki isn't far ahead. He's been running all out for hours now, and he's probably either stopped completely or is running slower. We've found no indication that he has soldier pills or that he ran across any travelers or other ninjas with supplies. We will assume he is armed though, and he has his jutsus, though he should be about out of chakra. He is more than likely hungry, and his thinking and reactions will be sluggish. The Anbu looked from one face to the other and noted with some surprise that Naruto didn't look confused in the slightest. The rumors that the boy was somewhat mature beyond his years was not unfounded. The Anbu blinked behind his mask and focused on Naruto. We didn't have much time to prepare you for this mission. In truth, we could have taken a few moments to let you go and get some gear. But this is part of your appraisal. You'll be placed in situations sometimes where you'll have nothing but your hands. Luckily, you carry your field knife with you at all times, so you have that. That's all you'll have this go around. Your mission is to subdue the enemy without killing him. You'll have to interrogate him later. Naruto nodded and fingered the hilt of his knife, comforting himself with the way the leather felt against his fingertips. He just couldn't wrap his mind around what he was about to do. Anbu-san, I'm not even a genin yet, and Mizuki is a high chunin level ninja. All I have is my field knife. Anko frowned at her student and whacked him in the back of the head. You also have personal training from the best ninjas in the village, a Kekkei Genkai that nearly guarantees success, and a mind that will allow you to plan this through. You have every weapon you need. You'll do fine, Naruto. We'll be just on the perimeter, watching you. If anything goes wrong, we'll jump in and stop it. The blonde settled down noticeably after that and began to plan ahead for what he was going to do. The Anbu stiffened suddenly and nodded to Ibiki. The cage Bunshin I sent ahead has confirmed that Mizuki is a mile away, hiding in a cave that goes back about 50 feet. He has set a few rudimentary traps around the entrance to alert him to any pursuers and has somehow procured a few shuriken and kunai from the looks of things. The white mask that the blonde was wearing bobbed up and down at the report. Anko and Ibiki stayed quiet during the talk. This was Naruto's show to run as he saw fit. Did the clone see how Mizuki himself looked? He was huddled in a far corner, drifting in and out of sleep, I believe. It was hard to tell in the dark. You can tell he's fatigued though, because his traps, though crude, were poorly and hastily laid. He shouldn't be much trouble for you. Thank you, Anbu-san. If you can create a clone to lead me to the cave, I'll begin extraction. Anko blinked, surprised at her student's professional tone. She could only hope and pray that things would go smoothly. With Mizuki, as tired as he was, it shouldn't be too hard, and then Naruto could make his first interrogation. She could only imagine what his methods would be. Ibiki shook her from her thoughts and motioned for her to follow him. They followed the Anbu to just outside the cave and waited for the fireworks. Naruto wordlessly followed Anbu's shadow clone, weaving through the brush like a ghost. The clone never once looked back, and when it got to the edge of the clearing around the cave, it turned to Naruto and bobbed its head in a nod before dispelling itself. Naruto took his knife out of its scabbard and closed his eyes before melting into the ground slowly. He opened his eyes to the black and white world of the melt, the sensations that came along with it assaulting his senses, but he quickly got them back under control. He saw the traps Mizuki had set up and shook his head. It wasn't becoming of a ninja of Mizuki's caliber to set up such slipshod traps. What confused him was the fact that there was more than just Mizuki's tracks present. He hadn't been told that there was more than one man they were pursuing. He moved through the ground slowly, cautiously approaching his prey. He was becoming more and more excited by the minute, and that reflected on the thoughts of the demon inside him. Yes, the hunt that chased the thrill, the blood. Naruto was too excited himself to even pay attention to Kyuubi's ramblings. He was caught in the moment, all fear gone, the adrenaline kicking in. This was what was expected of a Konoha ninja, to kill in the name of the village so that your friends and family would be safe. That thought steeled his resolve. He wouldn't ever let another incident like the one with his mother happen if he could help it. And if eliminating these missing nins was part of that, then so be it. He maneuvered through the ground until he came to the stone of the cave and moved through the new material seamlessly. He and Anko had done extensive work on being able to move through substances without stopping, and the fruition of their efforts showed here. Naruto moved to the roof of the cave and observed his quarry. Two men were asleep beside a small fire, while one sat on watch for the hunter nins. They were all obviously tired, and the one on watch kept nodding in and out of sleep. Naruto weighed his options and began to move to the top of the cave. He had had information deliberately kept from him. If it weren't for the fact that he was undetectable while using his Kekkei Genkai, he would have probably been killed by the three men. This was a test for him though, and he had to pull through. He couldn't disappoint his grandfather and all his senses after all the work they'd put into him. Mizuki was to be taken alive if possible, and the other two were expendable. Naruto shuddered as he thought of that word expendable. Like they were items to be used and thrown away. Humans in general are expendable. Naruto was halfway convinced by now that the Kyuubi couldn't really converse with him and that he was picking up the beast's random thoughts. He could be wrong, but he wasn't about to try to make contact with the thing. Now he had to think how he would go about this. He couldn't just go in and capture Mizuki while he eliminated the other two, or could he? Naruto formed 6 clones and sat down cross-legged to discuss strategy with them. Okay, look. I need 2 of you to take out the unknown ninjas. Quiet, just like Anko-sensei taught us. I want them to feel as little pain as possible, so I want you to put your knives through their brains. Just try to be humane. 2 of the clones nodded, and Naruto turned to the rest. I want you all to focus on Mizuki. We have to take him alive, so subdue him, and I'll run damage control. Remember, if we eliminate the other 2 first, it's for the better. We don't know what they're capable of, so they have to go. Alright, let's do this. The clones nodded and watched as Naruto melted into the stone before following suit. The blonde in the white mask watched as his doppelgangers moved into position and waited for the moment to strike. Months working with his Kekkei Genkai had yielded very fruitful results. Having nothing to go on, it was like building a model from the ground up with no instructions. You put a piece here, see if it fits, and if it does, go with that. They'd found out that not only was Naruto faster in the ground and able to melt into virtually anything, but his clones could melt as well as he could, albeit at a slower pace. It was still extremely useful and potentially deadly to the enemy. The only thing they hadn't ventured into was trying to melt into and with other humans. Naruto didn't want to think about what might go wrong, and Anko wasn't willing to let him experiment on her if something did go wrong. He could understand that, but the possibilities. His clones were in position, and Naruto forced his arm down, signaling for them to begin. One of the clones moved toward the upright man, while another went to the sleeping ninja. At the same time they melted out of the ground. The man who was on guard had been dozing lightly when he felt a hand clamp around his mouth, and his eyes opened just in time to stare into the fire before light burst into his vision and everything faded to black. There had been a slight twitch in his temple, and everything bled black. The clone had clapped a hand over his mouth before jamming the field knife in the man's head and twisting. The sleeping man never even woke up or noticed that he had been killed. The clone jammed the knife directly into his ear, killing him instantly. The man had met the Shinigami without ever knowing how in the hell he had gotten there. Naruto melted out of the ground slowly, the cloak around him giving him an amorphic shape, his white mask yielding nothing about his expression. The sight behind the mask would have given anyone pause, as the usually cherry blonde's face was frozen in a grimace of acceptance. He didn't want to do this, but he had to. The clones that had killed the men stepped behind him and watched as their fellow clones melted out of the ground and knelt beside each of Mizuki's limbs. They turned their blank masks to Naruto, and he gave them a single nod to start. They turned back to the man laying spread eagle on the floor, and 2 grabbed his ankles, while the other 2 grabbed his hands so he couldn't perform any jutsus. Mizuki felt his hands being clasped and leapt to his feet. The clones let him stand before the 2 behind Naruto ran forward and slammed their shoulders into Mizuki's torso, throwing him against the wall and holding him there, while the others melted into the wall, effectively nailing him to the stone behind him in a crucifix position. Mizuki's eyes were wide, and he was now fully awake and aware of the bodies holding him. He looked across the dimly lit cave to see the small figure that stood unmoving, its features hidden by the cloak and mask. His breath caught in his throat when he realized what had happened. Anbu. His gaze darted around until he found his cohorts lying on the ground and slumped against the wall, both dead with wounds to the brain. This person, for he did not know who it was, had snuck into the cave, evaded their traps, and killed his cohorts without waking any of them. He did the only thing he could think of. He screamed. Anko, Ibiki, and the Anbu heard the shrill scream and immediately rushed into the cave, skimming over all the crude traps. Anko was the first one in and was just in time to hear Naruto growl exasperatedly. "Would you please shut the hell up?" Mizuki didn't have time to answer before Naruto flipped his blade over in his hand so that it was held backwards and jammed the hilt forward right into Mizuki's forehead, knocking him out cold. His body went limp in the clone's arms and Naruto turned to the entrance. "About time you three showed up. You could have told me that there were two more guys." Anko winced at the coolness of the boy's voice. It was a tone that didn't suit Naruto and she knew he was trying to maintain his composure. He just didn't like to kill, even though he had done so beautifully. The two lying in steadily whitening pools of blood were evidence that the boy had talent. "Naruto, this was a test. Albeit a hastily thrown together test, but a test of your skill nonetheless. You only have one more part to complete. Can you do it?" The blank mask swung to Ibiki and he gazed back at the boy as if disinterested. He had to know if the boy could go through with his initiation. Naruto looked toward where Mizuki was held against a wall and sighed. Anko walked over to him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Do you want to go back to Konoha and take some time before the interrogation?" Naruto shook his head and shrugged her hand off as he turned to face Mizuki. "No. Better to do it here while I still have the nerve to do it." Anko stepped back to Ibiki and the Anbu. She couldn't guess what her protege would do. Naruto grimaced behind his mask and took a few deep, calming breaths. He'd need all his nerve to do this, all of his wits. Any mistakes could be disastrous. He couldn't afford to slip up. Without turning around, Naruto queried the Anbu. "What do I need to find out?" "Mizuki has been involved in questionable acts for many years now. We need to know who he is working with and anything else you can figure out." Naruto nodded and turned back to the man pinned to the wall. His clones simply stared at him as he walked forward. Once he stood before Mizuki, he cocked his fist back. "Make him feel pain." And slugged Mizuki in the jaw as hard as he could. The silver-haired man's eyes fluttered and he slowly raised his head. He couldn't figure out why he couldn't move his arms until he looked to the side and found his body held to the wall by hands that came out of the wall and two clones of the man before him. He started to scream again when the cloaked figure appeared in front of him and clamped a hand over his mouth. "Quiet. Do not scream. I have questions to ask you, and you will answer them. If you answer my questions to my satisfaction, I will speak to the Hokage about lessening your sentences." He removed his hand from Mizuki's mouth, and the man glared at the white mask, having regained his composure. "I don't believe that for a second. Like a nameless Anbu has any pull with the Hokage." Naruto reached his hand up to his mask slowly. "A nameless Anbu having pulled with the Hokage, no. But..." He pulled the mask all the way off and threw the hood back, revealing who he was to his one-time sensei. "The grandson of the Hokage, yes. Now then, let's talk." Mizuki snarled and lurched against his captors, yielding no results. "Damn demon. Even here you torment me. You should be dead, you should have died when you were sealed." "I'm not the demon. It is sealed. Now then, my questions." "I'm not telling you anything, demon. You worthless piece of filth. All my supposed crimes against Konoha are nothing compared to yours. I owe you and the village that turned its back on me nothing." Naruto smacked the man in the mouth, keeping that emotionless look on his face. It was hard to keep it up, but the more Mizuki talked, the less he cared about the man's welfare. Interrogating a man that he loathed made torturing him all the more satisfying. If he won't talk, make him bleed. Naruto grit his teeth and shook his head. He didn't need Kyuubi to speak up now. He needed to concentrate. "You'll tell me who you are working with and why. You'll tell me what I want to know, or I will make you wish for death." Mizuki sneered and spit in Naruto's face. The three older ninjas watched unflinching. This was the usual back and forth that most went through. Very rarely would an enemy crack at the beginning. A very loud growl cut through the silence and Anko shuddered, making the other two turn to her as she whispered lowly. "Kami, I hate it when he does that." The Anbu watched as Naruto bared his fangs and advanced on Mizuki again. He had to admit, the boy got points for intimidation and enthusiasm. If things persisted in this way for very long though, he would have to call him off. How does he do that? Does he massage the throat with chakra, and can it be taught? Anko shook her head and watched as Naruto grabbed Mizuki by the throat. It's a natural thing. He doesn't use chakra to make that noise. It's been confirmed by Hyugas. We think it's a defense mechanism from having the Kyuubi, kind of like his fangs. Scares the hell out of the people when he does it though. Naruto slammed Mizuki's head back against a wall and gripped the man's forehead tightly, forcing him to make eye contact. Mizuki was scared stiff after that growl. It only confirmed that the boy was indeed the Kyuubi. Fear. The fear is so tasty. Tell me what I want to know, or I'll make you wish that the Shinigami would come to claim you. Demon. Naruto slammed his fist to the left of Mizuki's head, leaving an imprint in the rock. He was tired of mind games. No wonder Anko preferred the direct approach. I'll make you wish I was the demon. Who are you working with? I won't tell you anything. Naruto could see that Mizuki was breaking. Time to pull out some more stops. So the man was afraid of Kyuubi, huh? Well, he'd give him Kyuubi. Naruto stepped back from Mizuki and cracked his neck. This might break the man's mind, but he wouldn't know until he did it. Naruto's hand sunk into his cloak and he subtly made the sign for Kage Bunshin. One burst into existence and Naruto bade it come closer so he could whisper into its ear. Get behind me and change into a smaller version of the Kyuubi. Then, while the smoke obscures the vision, I'll melt into the ground. You act as it would. The clone nodded and moved behind him to do as it had been told, while Naruto turned back to Mizuki. If you think I am the demon, then who am I to try to change your mind? I'll give you what you see. I'll give you your demon. Just remember, Mizuki, you could have done it the easy way. The clone behind him performed the henge, and, as the smoke covered him, Naruto melted into the ground. When the smoke cleared, it revealed a snarling, frothing Kyuubi in miniature form advancing slowly on Mizuki, 1 inch at a time. The silver-haired man began to shake violently and struggled against the clones, but to no avail. No. No. Damn you all. Stop him, he's let the demon loose. Yes. Fear truly worthy of gazing upon my visage, even in a smaller form. The 3 senior ninjas stood silently, amazed that Naruto would use such an underhanded tactic to prey on the man's fear. Anko was both proud of her pupil and sad that he had taken to her profession so well, even against his better judgment. It seemed the boy truly had no say in what his life would lead him to. Naruto watched from the ground as Mizuki began to rant and rave. He promised to tell them anything they wanted to know, as long as they would take the Kyuubi away, seal it away again. In the pit of his stomach, Naruto felt sick. He had preyed on a man's fear to get information. But it had to be done in the name of Konoha. Mizuki cried and pleaded as the clone advanced ever so slowly until Naruto melted out of the ground in front of the fox look-alike. Dispel yourself. Your job is done. The fox looked Mizuki dead in the eye and waved its tails widely before a huge grin split its face. The man whimpered and looked to Naruto for mercy. Please, I'll tell you whatever you want to know, just don't let him near me again. Tell me what I want to know. Mizuki told him everything. That he had been marked by Orochimaru, that he had planned to steal the forbidden scroll before he left, but the security was too tight, that he had killed teammates before for being weak. The more Naruto listened to the man, the more his pity and loathing for the man grew. Mizuki was a pawn who knew nothing. He didn't know where Orochimaru was or any of the man's plans. Mizuki had been mentally disturbed, but no one had reached out to help him. He had been jealous and greedy for power by any means necessary. Naruto closed his eyes, afraid to open them for fear of seeing Mizuki's face. One last thing, Mizuki. Why do you hate me? There was no hesitation in his answer. Because you're a demon. Naruto opened his eyes and turned to the 3 behind him, the Anbu in particular. Is that enough? The Anbu nodded once, and Naruto stepped forward to Mizuki and drew his knife. Your crimes against Konoha are heavy, Mizuki. There is only one punishment for your transgressions. Mizuki started to scream when he saw Naruto heft the knife, but before any sound escaped his lips, cold steel had embedded itself into his throat. Naruto watched the man gurgle, and eventually his eyes went blank, signifying his death. Without a word, Naruto dispelled his clones and turned to go outside, not paying attention, as Mizuki's body hit the ground with a thump. Death. A kill to be admired and proud of. Anko reached out to him as he passed by. Naruto? He didn't say a word as he brushed past her. Anko looked to Ibiki for help. Go talk to the brat. He needs someone right now. It was his first real time, and he did it beautifully. We'll take care of the cleanup. Anko nodded and started to chase after the boy, but retrieved his knife first. Naruto always felt better with his knife in his hand, and it might comfort him now. She didn't have to look far. He was sitting on top of the cave entrance, about 20 feet up. She leapt into the air and landed beside him. Here's your knife, kiddo. You did good back there. I think the Anbu was impressed. Naruto said nothing, just stared out into darkness with his arms wrapped around his knees. Naruto, you did what had to be done. Hokage-sama will be so proud of you. He still said nothing, and she saw tears forming at the corner of his eyes. Anko sighed and sat his knife down beside her before she enveloped the boy in a hug. Come on, Naruto, just let it out. I won't tell anyone. And he cried. And he wailed. And he bawled. Anko just held him with her eyes closed. This was perhaps the first time that a man had gotten this close to her without getting his throat slit, and the only person who had ever been close to her chest. She might be a tease, but Anko was picky about her men, and no one had ever been good enough. She waited until Naruto's sobs quieted down, and he settled into small sniffles and hiccups. He finally began to shift out of her grip, but she kept her arm around his shoulder. So ready to talk about it? Naruto shifted around, getting more comfortable in her hold. I can't believe I did that, Anko-sensei. I preyed on that man's fears and broke his mind. I killed him. I could see the fear in his eyes as I took his life. Am I a monster? Anko squeezed him tightly and forced him to look her in the eyes. Listen to me, Naruto. Listen well. You're not a monster. Everyone has told you this many times over the years. You did what you did in the name of Konoha, as a ninja of Konoha. There's one problem with that, sensei. I'm not a ninja of Konoha yet. The two were silent after that. It was true, Naruto wasn't a ninja yet. But he had the heart of one. He had gotten past the most difficult stage, as best he could. So what if he broke down and cried? He was just a boy. Now, he was more. I can hear it, sensei. Anko looked down at her student and squeezed him tightly. Hear what, brat? Naruto smiled softly at that nickname. It comforted him somewhat. Kyuubi. I was speaking while I interrogated Mizuki. It said my skill was something to be admired and something to be proud of. Anko stiffened and her grip loosened slightly. Does it talk to you? Naruto nodded and turned his eyes to the ground. Does the Hokage know? Naruto nodded again. Yeah, but I won't talk back to it. I don't acknowledge it. I refuse to. I won't let it influence me. Anko grinned and stood up, dragging the blonde up with her. I'm proud of you, brat, and I'm sure everyone else is, as well. Let's go home. And remember to clean your knife off. Blood leaves stains otherwise. Naruto smiled sadly and wiped the blade off on his pant leg. Eventually, everything would be all right. Sarutobi stared at everyone in his office, the three ninja, and the lone academy student. Report. The Anbu gave a very detailed report of the proceedings, with everyone else chiming in at the appropriate time. The only one who remained silent was Naruto. Naruto, I've heard all that your superiors have to say. Do you have anything to add? The blonde slowly let his vision settle on his grandfather. All I want is to just enjoy the rest of the school year with no more missions, no more paperwork, no more hardcore training. Let me be a normal student for the rest of the year. Please, Gigi. Sarutobi nodded his head in understanding. If anyone deserved a break, it was Naruto. Not even a full-fledged ninja yet, and already fulfilling his duties in the name of the village. Very well, Naruto. I agree with that. Consider yourself on leave from your duties. You'll still need to keep your skills sharp though, so Anko will help you on her off days. Naruto nodded and bowed to his grandfather. Can I be dismissed now? I'd really like to rest. Sarutobi nodded. I'll see you at home later, Naruto. Once the boy was gone, Sarutobi folded his hands and leaned on the desk. Now, tell me your unbiased opinions without the boy here. No sugarcoating. Eri had been waiting up for Naruto for what seemed like hours, Yuhiko trying to keep her calm. They'd been through several pots of tea already, but nothing seemed to settle her nerves. When she heard the door slide open, her head flew up and she gasped when she saw her son. Naruto was the epitome of a broken child. Gone was her innocent son. In his place was a shinobi who wasn't even yet a shinobi. She wrapped him in a hug, ignoring the blood on him. She didn't have to ask what had happened. It had already been explained to her beforehand. "Mom, can I sleep with you and Dad tonight? Just this once?" She smiled down at him and kissed the top of his head. "Of course, son. Just this once." Naruto showed up at school like nothing had happened. He had talked it over extensively with his father and grandfather, with Anko and Ibiki standing by, and had come to terms with what he had done. Anko had told him to find something to help him cope, and he was currently searching. He'd find something soon enough. He had to, or he'd go crazy. He'd paid Kiba and Hinata back for the ramen and apologized. He'd played Shikamaru in a game of Go and lost. He'd swapped chips with Chaoji and caught bugs with Shino. He'd played the good student. He'd beaten Sasuke down in every battle they had. He had been genial with Ino and was starting to let her in a little more, much to her delight. He was starting to notice a subtle difference in the girls around him, most notably Ino and Hinata. They seemed to be developing. Anko still teased him about a possible three-way. Naruto had found how he could cope for the time being. He threw himself into his life. He relished in his friends and family. He watched as Konohamaru got his own private tutor, a nice man by the name of Abisu, who was indifferent to Naruto at best. Naruto just shrugged the man off. He wasn't his sensei after all. His 13th birthday had come and gone with no incident. His family had gotten him a custom-tailored cloak to work with his Kekkei Genkai. Anko had promised to try to get him as her apprentice. Guy had not been able to come, being out on a mission with his team, but had sworn to make it up. Naruto couldn't believe he hadn't met his old sensei's team yet. He kept shy of Sasuke and his little fan club if possible. He got closer to Hinata when possible. He was trying to work up the courage to ask her on a small date, just something simple. His mother insisted the two looked so cute together. Naruto just thought Hinata was nice. It had been a good few months, and now it was 1 week from graduation, and Naruto was sitting in the Hokage's office, chatting with his grandfather, Anko. "I've been trying to decide who will be on teams, but I need help. Naruto, I want you to help me decide who should be divided amongst who. Your old academy sensei Kurenai has recently become a jounin and has requested a team to ease into her new title. She, Kakashi, and your uncle Asuma are all viable candidates for teams." Naruto looked at the list of names and the team assignments. When he got to his name, he froze. "Why am I paired with Uchiha Sasuke?" Anko slammed her hand on the table in anger. "I thought he was going to be my apprentice?" Sarutobi leveled a glare at the two, and the killing intent he let out nearly suffocated them. "Be quiet, you two. I won't have such insubordination, especially from you two. Anko, I never promised to make him your apprentice. The boy needs to learn team dynamics. You may still teach him on the side." Anko's shoulders sagged, visibly crushed by the decision. She'd been looking forward to being a proper sensei. Not even being allowed to help could cushion the blow. Sarutobi felt bad about his decision, but turned to an angry Naruto. "Sasuke needs someone to be a rival to him. He needs someone to measure himself against. You are that someone." Naruto looked at his grandfather in exasperation. "Jiji, haven't you read the psychology reports on Uchiha Sasuke? He hates me, and he only wants power. Putting the two of us together is a volatile situation just waiting to happen. I won't do it. You will do, as I say, Naruto. I need someone I can trust to keep an eye on that boy. I may be your grandfather, but here, in this office, I am your ruler and superior. What I say goes." Naruto glared at his grandfather. He was tired of being told what to do. "No. I won't be on his team." Sarutobi's scowl could have lit his desk on fire. "What did you say to me, boy? I won't be on his team. This idea is stupid, Jiji, especially for one of your intelligence. It won't work. I'll kill him the first week. And Kakashi, as our sensei? The man doesn't care two wits about me. He'll spend all his time with Sasuke because they share the Sharingan. Sakura? She hates me because Sasuke does, and the team dynamic just isn't there, Jiji. You may, as well, just put me with Anko-sensei. At least she and I get along." Anko smirked at the boy's counterpoint, but Sarutobi would not be swayed. "You will be on that team, and that is final. My word is Naruto. You will do as I say. Tradition has the Hokage on a team of 3, and then you will take a team of your own when the time comes." Naruto stalked to the door. He could have melted out of the office, but he really felt like slamming something at the moment. He turned to his grandfather with fire in his eyes. "Tradition, tradition. It's always tradition with you, Hokage-sama. I guess it was really traditional to seal a demon in a goddamn baby's stomach, as well. Fuck tradition. Sarutobi hollered out as the door slammed. You watch your mouth, boy. The slam was deafening, and he slumped back in his chair, looking at Anko. He's picked up your language, I see. Anko merely glared at the Hokage. She'd get her word in, as well. Like I said before, Hokage-sama, traditions have to be broken sometimes for the good of all. The boy asks for so little. Don't make him suffer just to make someone else's life easier. She bowed to the man and left, a lot quieter than her pupil. Sarutobi looked at the picture of the yondaime and sighed. Minato, what should I do? The Uchiha is a flight risk, the psychologist said. I need Naruto to watch him since he's the only one I can trust. But his happiness and growth is at stake, as well. What should I do? That thought plagued him for a couple of days until he made his decision. He would do what was best for. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time, till then sayonara.